Our guests on today's episode are Tim and Winona from Roll Call, a talent attraction consulting agency. And I got to tell you, when I first met these two, I met them. They are engaging with the state of North Dakota, our Workforce Development Council, to help us at a macro level, at the state level, deal with, address and approach our workforce development challenges differently. And so the Workforce Development Council of the state of North Dakota met here at Growing Small Towns, and they came along. And immediately I met them, and it was just this like beautiful, honest, real energy exchange. They are delightful. They have a really unique outlook on the importance of people, and that when it comes to why people choose to move to places, it's about engaging their hearts. And so since I always talk about open minds and open hearts, it was like this beautiful new friendship. And I think you're going to find that as you listen to them, they're just so real about it. And, I got to say, like, people are super messy. We're nuanced. We're complex. And I love to wade into that, and they love it too. And so it's exciting to me because I think sometimes we think, how do we make this super simple? And how do we make a process and how do we systematize or operationalize this kind of unique and customized part of reaching people's hearts? That's one of their big challenges. But I see that this is a challenge every single one of us in small towns has. How do we speak to the hearts of people? How do we get them to want to call our places home? So without further ado, meet my new soul sister and brother, Tim and Winona from Roll Call. Hi, guys.
Hi,
Rebecca.
So people are already going to know because I will already have done this little intro, but you two, you came into Oaks like a wrecking ball, you guys, and it was amazing. And had me at hello kind of people. And so I've often said, and I'm sure I would love to hear your thoughts on this. As you toured North Dakota, we'll talk a bit about what your role is going to be with our state, which is super cool. But I am one of those people that I can do small talk. I would just prefer not to. And with you two, it was like, bam, and we went deep and fast, and it was awesome. So tell us a little bit about what the tour of North Dakota was like. I mean, and I'm just so thrilled to have you guys. I'm so thrilled to have met you and to know you, and it's going to be super fun. And people are like, what the hell is this? Go, guys. Tell us
First of all, sane.
Yeah, I was about to say, let's start with likewise, for sure. And Rebecca, I think you were very hyped, sort of statewide. You were one of the last trips on our statewide tour of North Dakota, and everyone was like, you just have to meet Rebecca. It's going to be so great. And we were like, okay, excited, but there's no way she's going to live up to this week-long hype session. And you absolutely did. It was amazing.
And
it really
then
was
some.
Instant. Absolutely. So it was just so great to meet you. And it's really opened a lot of doors, I think, for us in terms of the program we're doing, but also just as the way we think about the work we do, just the conversations we've had so far.
Yeah.
It's just so cool. Finding people who speak your language is just, sometimes it's rare. We found it a lot in North Dakota. But yeah, like you said, just right away, it was great.
It was funny. So that day, so you were here in our space in Oaks for Workforce Development Council, and then we can talk a lot about what that's going to look like. But I went home and I said to my husband, I'm like, I met the two coolest people. And then I do all of this, and he's just like, it's so funny because he just doesn't get it, and it's not his fault. It's just, I'm like, no, I can ride the wave of Winona and Tim for a really long time. You don't understand. So it's just, it really is. I wouldn't say it's rare. I feel like it happens more and more. In small towns, neither of you are in particularly small towns. Now, Tim, yours is a little smaller than Winona's town.
Yes.
But this is one of the things that I think comes up a lot. People, as I'm talking to other people in small towns, they're like, the idea of finding your tribe and what that really means. And that's too cliche of a phrase for me. It's it's more than that. But I totally feel like the two of you are part of that core group for me now, which is, it's super special. And it really is important if you're going to try to do this kind of work it's soul taxing. It's not just mentally taxing. It's not just like it's all of it, right? Yeah. So all of that is to say that's like the longest love festy intro known to man, and I don't even care. I'm not even sorry. If you guys are all checked out, like, too bad.
Yeah, we could keep going too. So we're really.
I know
that could be the whole hour.
I know, it's just back and forth. Like, you're the prettiest. No, you're the prettiest. It's amazing. I think we talked about that. Sometimes you just need someone to tell you you're pretty. Like, we don't really mean that, right? I think we said that at the end when you guys were walking out. Okay, so let's talk about Roll Call, the company that you two founded. And again, like, I think for people that know me and that listen to the show, I obviously have a lens through which I view things, and it tends to be very people-centric, right? That's my thing. Like, I just don't think a lot of times when we're talking systems change, we spend enough time talking about that really important human capital piece of the equation. And when I met with you guys, it was just like, you met me right there. Like, so speaking my language, it was just like, you came in at that exact same spot. And I was like, who are these angels? So let's talk about Roll Call and what it's going to look like for North Dakota. Because again, we have listeners from all over. And the whole thing is, as we're talking, let's not forget, like, people that are listening to us, what can they do in their small place, in their simple way? Like, what can we help people and inspire people to do, regardless of their position, their level, and where they're at? It's a tall order, but. Right.
Well, I think so. Part of the reason that we founded Roll Call was because if you think about the way candidates apply for jobs or people apply for jobs, it's a horrible process. It's
right.
Like, especially if you're searching for a lot of jobs, right? Like, if you're kind of open to doing a number of things, you go to all these company websites, you fill out the exact same application, and they take a long time. It's boring. You have to write your resume in there sometimes when you really just upload it and attach. It's a pain in the butt.
Right.
And so there's got to be a better way to do it, right? And especially if somebody's applying for all these jobs in one place. So we came at it from both the candidate and the city's perspective. So the cities and states and regions all need people, right? There's this major talent crisis. We're hearing about the Great Resignation. We're hearing about people fleeing from major metros to live in places that are a little bit smaller. But if they're doing their research, it's sort of the same thing, right? Like, you can get to these talent attraction websites that have been out there for a while. But if you're a candidate, you're going to these websites and all you're doing is reading blogs and watching videos and seeing what other people like to live there. And then you still have to go out and apply for all these jobs in a place that you don't know.
Right.
And for companies that don't know you. So we found a way to bridge that gap in taking it from an economic development standpoint. So we're not recruiters or headhunters. We work with them, and they're really important partners in the work we do for our economic development partners. But it's really figuring out a way to get people to places they love for jobs they want to work in. And making it easier to do in one spot instead of 100 spots.
Okay, so before Winona shares like her take on this as well, I have a couple questions, or like clarifying questions, or just because here's for me why I see this as being so different. And of course, I embrace different. A lot of towns and a lot of government agencies and economic development groups, it's not that they don't love different, but it can be very hard to get them to say, oh, that makes total sense, right? So traditionally, at least, okay, so I'm brand new to economic development, guys. Like, I've been doing it for a year in my town, right? Now, I would argue I've been doing economic development since the moment I stepped back into my hometown, because I think it's a much more holistic thing.
We would support that argument. Yeah.
And I think that's what I kind of want you to help reframe a bit, because I can only beat a drum so much by myself. You know what I mean? Like, in this, I feel like it's not an argument, because I don't like the idea of fighting for it. I like the idea of working with the willing and loving the rest, which we've talked a lot about, right? just yesterday, I met with our economic development group, and this idea of a holistic perspective, they're not resistant to it, but they're still struggling a little bit. What messaging, what do we need to, how do we help those people that have a very historical, traditional view of what economic development means, which typically it's business recruitment and job creation. Like, in fact, when I started this organization, it was like I would apply for these grants and they'd say, how many jobs are you going to create? And I was like, son of a bitch, I'm not, why is that the thing? You know, and I would get really frustrated because it's like, what if we help 5 people start side hustles? Mm-hmm. Those aren't jobs per se, but they may turn into, you know, what do you guys think about kind of that traditional and, you know, lens on the whole thing? And how do we help people come alongside us? What do you think?
So you're just such our professional soulmate, Rebecca. This is exactly why we started the company, exactly how we think about this stuff. I think it's just, this is a massive reframing of economic development, what success looks like in economic development, what the sort of boundaries and possibilities of economic development are. It's, you know, for the past 10, 15, 20 years, even farther back, it's been, you know, cities and regions and states have employed teams of people to, like you said, go after businesses and say, come relocate or open a factory here, open a new headquarters here. We'll give you all these tax breaks. Here's some cheap land. And then they kind of get to like go through and check the boxes of like, okay, we, you know, took some CEOs out to dinner, or maybe we did relocate a company and we created all these jobs. But in the past, I would say, like, Tim, what do you think? 5, 10 years, even maybe even more recently?
Probably not quite 10. Yeah.
We're seeing a shift from business attraction to talent attraction being the main need. And that's really, it hasn't been because people are excited to embrace change. It's because the businesses now are coming to the cities and the states and saying, why would we come there when you have no workers, no people?
Yeah. If you look at it, if you look at a place like North Dakota, that's got a population of 800,000,
right,
with a 2% unemployment rate in most places, and 35,000 jobs open,
right?
Why would a company look at that and say that's a good place for us to relocate? And if they do, what does that mean for the existing industry that's already there? Like, we're already fighting for workers, and now you just brought in a place that's going to hire 600 people from us. It's not. It's almost. I think the change is coming less because people are excited in this industry to change, and more just because that's a math problem that needs to get solved. Right. But for us at Roll Call, we're like, you also can't solve this by just looking at it as a math problem and checking the boxes the same way that traditionally you have for business attraction. Because when you're trying to recruit individuals, when you're trying to get them to make a relocation decision which is arguably, maybe besides who you marry, the most important decision you can make in your life is where are you going to live? That's an extremely personal, extremely high stakes decision. And it doesn't happen by just some, like, you know, a pithy phrase on a billboard or a cool website and you call it done and check the boxes. You really have to go find the people who are going to align and thrive in your place, and then talk to them directly and say, here's exactly what we have to offer you, why you can thrive here, and what we're going to do to help you get here. That's what Roll Call does. And I think we didn't get a chance to answer sort of the first question that you asked, was like, what was it like being in North Dakota?
Yeah.
You know, and neither one of us had ever been in the state before.
Well, welcome to God's country, guys.
I know
it's a little chilly, but
that's all right. 68 degrees inside at all times.
And warm hearts.
That's right.
That's what I always say. Like, we'll thaw you out with our warmth, decency.
I love that. And it's very true. And I think, so like Winona said, it's you have to take this very, very personalized approach. And North Dakota is in a very advantageous place, I think, in order to be able to do that, because you just have a different access in North Dakota than you do in so many other places. You know, like, I don't think I've ever been in a place, and we've been doing this work for a while, and we've met with people all over the country, but I've never felt like this sense of connection among people who work in the state like I have. Like, we're all the way out in Western North Dakota, and people are mentioning you, Rebecca, that, oh, you guys are going to get to meet Rebecca. Like that doesn't happen in most places.
There's kind of a shared context and a shared language and a shared community statewide that is very rare and very special.
Yeah.
And I think speaks not just to the state being small in population. That's not the reason. It's an attitude and a cultural thing.
Totally. I live in a state of 3 million people. I live in Iowa, and it is absolutely not the case here. You know,
well, and it's that's interesting to me because although you have some metros that are bigger than our biggest metro, like I get that, you're still, the landscape demographically could be arguably kind of similar, right?
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Far more rural than non.
Yeah, totally. And
so that's actually really super encouraging.
Than the western part of the state. And,
yeah, that's really encouraging. I love to hear that, of course.
And I think part of it too, like I think it could be a very exclusive group, you know, the people who are sort of getting the work done, but it is not like that at all. There's this really cool sense of like shared success across the state that is not common. And so I think getting back to the work that we do, as far as, you know, providing people with like this inviting feeling of North Dakota, it's just going to make our work so much easier because so much of the work has already been done. And a lot of that is because of people like you and the bus tour that I know your listeners have heard about, and the work that the Department of Commerce is doing, moving the Workforce Development Council across the state and having those meetings in different, it's been very intentional and very smart. And like, it doesn't take long to feel it when you're up there. That's
special. And I love it. I think it's important to, and I would say this for anybody listening, it's like, whether it's your city, whether your scope of influence is your church or your, like, whatever your scope of influence is, try really hard to put on the eyes of a newcomer. Mm-hmm. You know, try to walk through your space, your place, whatever, again, that sphere of influence, whatever you're dealing with, and think about it like, if I were a guest here, and just really take that time to notice things like there is so much we can learn from that, because we all just get really complacent, not for any reason other than it's just like same old, same old. And the people doing really great work and the people really every day making your community what it is, it's easy to forget and overlook those people over time. So that's an encouragement. 100%. That's something everybody listening to this could do, right? Drive through your town and get some coffee, put on some tunes, and really pay attention. And just see what you notice, you know, see what stands out, what's beautiful, what needs work, you know, all of that. And you guys offer a perspective on North Dakota that is obviously quite refreshing. But also it's just super exciting to me because I know I get to see your faces and continue to work with you on this stuff. So I love that. I think that's great. So now let's talk a little bit though about what are going to be the biggest challenges do you think, for communities to adopt? Because it feels to me, and maybe this is the unfair characterization, you can call me on it if it's not quite right, but it almost feels like radical hospitality.
Oh, I love that.
I like it too.
We might steal that, Rebecca.
Steal it all day long. But I've talked about that in Oaks, right? Like when pen out, bam, down, took the notes. I love it.
Got it.
But I've talked a lot about that, you know, when a group of people like the Workforce Development Council comes to my town. Now I can roll out red carpet hospitality, you know, that idea of radical hospitality within the confines of my space, because I own the space and that's my job. But what would it look like for a community to take that on? And what needs to happen for people to think that way? I've often said, and again, would just love your take on this, like some of the most important people in that discussion are people that work the counters at like gas stations. Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, 100%. 100%.
You know, yes. And I don't know that they've probably never been treated with that kind of reverence, which I think that's on us. Like we could change that. But also then what would a really great frontline worker like development plan, like a training curriculum that just anytime, like at a community level, not that we burden the employer with that, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's like the ins and outs of what you have to do your job right. But then you have this really important ambassador role for the community. Like everybody that stops through
and
here.
It is so important and can be a game changer for the positive or negative. Those really are the welcomers. They're the first impression makers. Right. Tim and I work this into our actual process of any consulting job that we do, any, market visit that we do. We of course want to meet with major employers and leaders and the kind of the people in the community who are making policy and big decisions. But we always carve out time to, go to the dive bar and chat with people, chat with the Uber drivers, talk to the host at the restaurant. What brought you here? What do you like about living here? What's your favorite thing, your best kept secret? That's really a part of our work. And just kind of, it really helps us, I think, kind of gauge the culture in a way that you wouldn't get just sitting in conference rooms with kind of the big players in the community.
Right. And I think, go ahead, Tim.
No, please. I was just going to say, and it's like, you can't go around and train every gas station clerk or supermarket checkout person. I guess they're clerks too.
What if we could though, Tim?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you can, but I think part of it is maybe we love where we live, right? But I think there's a difference between loving where you live or just living where you live and actively choosing where you live. And if we can figure out a way to get people to actively choose where they live every day, and that might be sort of a pie in the sky sort of thing, but and just the state and the regions across the state being part of this work that we're doing, is part of our job is to remind people that they live in a really special place, and not to take that for granted. You don't read articles about people fleeing Oaks or even fleeing Fargo. Right. That's not happening. Right. Because people are sort of looking inside themselves, and we've had this new opportunity now to be like, what are my values, and do they align with where I am in my life, both professionally and where I live? And North Dakota checks a lot of those boxes for a lot of people, and whether they know it or not. If they live in the state, they might not know that now it's a time to reevaluate that. But part of our job is to find people outside the state. Actually, this is sort of the main part of our job, and either get them to recheck those boxes if they've left North Dakota. We want to get them to come back, and remind them what makes it so great, but also educate people on the great quality of life you can have there. You're not settling by moving to North Dakota. I mean, that's absolutely not. And just speaking to that point, that messaging isn't just as important, I think, for insiders and locals and current residents as it is for the new ones. And the way that we talk about it is this idea, we call it community onboarding. So what we tell all of our clients is if you put out a campaign to say, move to this place, and you get someone to move there, that's incredible. That's a huge success, and congratulations, but you're also not done at all. You have to onboard that person into the community, get them engaged, connect them with their future friend group, their volunteer opportunities, their dream job, all that stuff. And so part of, as we were talking to people all across the state in North Dakota, every single community, when we said, what is your favorite thing about this place or what makes this place special? Every single community says people, right? And that's incredible. And that is special. And it was coming from a really deep place for all of those people for slightly different reasons across the board. But our job is really figuring out, how do we sort of operationalize that love and those good people and those connections and that sense of community that everyone's talking about? And how do we make sure that every single newcomer has a way to access that? Because like you're saying, being a newcomer, especially in a small town or a rural place, sometimes you just don't, the ins and kind of the open doors can be either hidden, or maybe they're not totally open at first, or they're not available. Right. And a lot of times it takes one great connector, one friend, one connection, one party, whatever it is. How can we help facilitate those moments and those connections and those connectors? It's a huge part of our work.
Yeah. Well, it's, we hosted a newcomer social here in Oaks a few weeks ago. And it's so funny. Like all I said was like, I don't know if this is going to mean anything or if this is going to work for people. But I said, we have to acknowledge that. Also, so there's two things. One, if you come to Oaks for a job, or you come to any place for a job, if you are working in a facility where you then have like a built-in coworker network, you already have at least that, right? And if those people give a shit at all about you or any of this, they're going to try to help you, right? Like that's kind of a given. But now we have this amazing opportunity to recruit remote workers. So, and I can speak from pure experience. This was my hometown and I came back, but I've worked from home and now I get to work in my beautiful space, but I worked from home the entire time. So even for me, it was like, I didn't have a built-in group of people guiding me, helping me. And it is actually very hard to navigate. It's kind of an underground system of how stuff gets done. And that's not intentional. It's like tribal knowledge. You know, it's like tribal knowledge. And then, I mean, that happens in companies too, right? And then new people can't come in and access anything because it's not written down anywhere. It's not made public. It's like, who has the secret hidden file on, you know, X, Y, or Z? And it's impossible.
And so people, once they have accessed it personally, they're so glad to have accessed it and are kind of on their way. And that's great. And you should be able to just sort of enjoy that community and lifestyle that you have now. But most of us aren't looking back and kind of trying to like take apart, how did that work? And how did that happen? How can I maybe help someone else have that?
And
you know?
How could that have been done easier?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. Not the questions we're asking. And those are the questions I'm asking. And people like, actually, I mean, the first time I said newcomer social, a few people actually rolled their eyes at me and it made me giggle. I'm like, I was like, you've been like a 50-year resident. Like you have no idea what it's like to come into, and I don't either anymore because I'm not a newcomer. So that's that whole thing. Like, how do you put on the eyes of a guest or a newcomer and really think about it? How hard is it to navigate? And you would think in a small town that it's not, but it is.
It is.
I think it can even be more challenging sometimes.
I agree.
Yeah, the way we've been talking about it, you know, it's been coming up in North Dakota, but just I think this applies to all small towns and rural communities. If tight-knit community is one of your biggest assets, that concept and that feeling, you have to also think about what that tight-knitness represents to an outsider trying to break in. That means that there's not a lot of openings on the outside, right? So like you have to think about that and be cognizant of that. And figure out how can we really mindfully and intentionally create those openings to bring people in.
It's not easy for everybody to seek them out. Not everybody's extroverts like we are.
That's right.
We can just go and ask the questions and find the movers and shakers. Like some people wait for that to come to them, you know, and they might not even come to that newcomer social.
Right.
You know? So how do you drag them out? You know, and there's different kinds of lonely too, right? Like there's lonely living in New York City when there's however many million people and you're just like this one anonymous person, but it's also lonely to live in a place with, you know, 1,800 people where you feel like
you don't belong.
You should be able to connect and you can't.
Right. And I think part of this too is recognizing that our place. So one of the, I guess, like energetic pushbacks and maybe mental pushbacks I've gotten to my approach and my thoughts about what we need to think about, you know, like I'm trying to head us in this direction. And I've had people say to me, well, we don't want everybody to move here. You know, like we don't really want to grow. And I think part of it, it's like, I guess in just general, this has become kind of my way of thinking about things, is being open-minded to other perspectives and other ideas does not fundamentally jeopardize my foundational beliefs. Like I can be grounded in who I am and what I believe in my values and still hold space out here for something that doesn't look, walk, talk, or act like me. And that's one of our biggest challenges, I think, just kind of culturally. And I hate it when people say like, oh, small town, so small-minded and so close-minded. And I'm like, I don't think that's what it is. That might be symptomatic of something, but it's not driven from intent. If we're not choosing to be closed-minded, we haven't been forced to think differently. But I think now represents this opportunity where we might be faced with these opportunities to invite in other groups and different ways of thinking. And there's groundwork that has to be laid on the human capital side of this if we're gonna become that place. So we will never be all things to all people. Like, that's not the point, right?
Yep.
You know, so like identity, knowing who we are. I'm giving you guys so many things to think about. And I'm sorry, I'm not even really asking a question. I'm just like rambling. But I guess I think like in the absence of definition, a culture still gets formed.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So for me, the question is the culture we have the one we really want? And if not, what then? Right?
Yeah.
Like if
so hard to be honest about that. It's such a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
No, not us. Like, yeah, maybe step aside, like Winona said before, and like pay attention to what it could be like to be a newcomer.
Right.
Know?
So how do you guys tackle some of that? That like the holding tight to who you've always been and honoring the past, right? Honoring all the incredible people, some of which maybe are still here, right? That got us to where we're at, maybe and this would be as a company or as a community. It's all kind of the same conversation. And also springboarding forward in a way that doesn't make all of this irrelevant and make everybody feel like shit. Like, oh, you don't like who, I mean, it was an argument somebody brought to me and they said, all you ever talk about is change. It makes it sound like you don't think we're good enough.
Wow.
And that, I said, I can appreciate that, that might be how I sound because I am very much like forward thinking. So that tension always exists for me. And I want to hold that balance as much as I can. So how does that play? What does that look like for you guys? How do you help communities think about it differently or do something differently? Help me, guys. Help me.
It's a great question. And I think I may have said this when we first met, but when we go out as consultants to other places, it's really easy for us to like sort of like grab people and shake them. Like, you're not being honest. You have to dig deeper. Like, okay, you have nice people. That's great. But like, I hate to break it to your listeners, but Minnesota nice is a thing. Iowa nice is a thing. Like, just like North Dakota nice, right? So it's a very Midwestern thing, is that we value our people, and it's really special. But like, how can we get past that? And like, is that always a great thing? We have great people here. And so we get to sort of challenge some of those beliefs. It's really hard, I think, as a resident, just like what you said, like, oh, we're not good enough for you. You need to change everything. And obviously that's not what you're saying. And I think change for a lot of people is scary,
Right.
And it doesn't mean that Oaks is going to be the next Chicago. Like, that's
right.
Not looking to bring thousands.
That's not the goal. That's not,
No.
I think this process has to start with effusive honesty. That's a core value of our company, and what we bring to every single project we work on is, let's get really, really honest of what do you have to offer and what are your weak points? What are just the strengths and weaknesses? Like, so let's celebrate all the great things that you have and all the ways that you don't want to change and all the things that are really special and great. Let's get real about those. Let's shout about those from the rooftops. But on the flip side, let's also make sure we're seeing and naming and owning what does need to get better, or what's not as good as it can be, or what's a big issue, right? Because those weak points can turn into invitations to invite people in and say, we are awesome for reasons A, B, and C. D, E, and F, we're working on it and we would love your help. And that's really how we view talent attraction, is just an invitation to enjoy the good things you have. And also let's all work together to improve the things that are lacking. And I think a lot of the communities we saw in North Dakota were at a point where they're really ready to get honest in a new way. I know it's a slow process, but they, the need is there and they're kind of ready to say, let's issue this invitation, even if that means kind of getting uncomfortable.
It's, one of the things I think so interesting about this too, it's recognizing that like North Dakota nice or Midwest nice, what the hell does nice actually mean? Right? Like people are we are so complex. And so like, even when I think about this from a company standpoint, when I'm helping a company think about who are we and what do we believe about the world that then influences how we act, that then influences what we get, right? Like that's how people work. That's how organizations work. Like it's your beliefs that drive your behavior and your behavior drives your results. So we often just talk about like, well, we're not attracting enough people. So we focus on the result, but we never back up to the fact that people and who we are and what we believe to be true influences the way we do things, right? Mm-hmm. So every company every company slash community slash group gets to make a decision about who they are and what they believe. Mm-hmm. You know, what do we value as a community? And then once you like can plant that flag, people, I mean, again, you have to maybe wave it too. You know, like you got to wave it and you got to say, this is who we are and who is looking for this kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And it actually goes right back to how you guys came into my world. I have planted a flag. Okay, I have a flag and I wave it like a freak. I let my freak flag fly, guys. I do. And it's like, these are the things I believe to be true. And the amazing people, you two numbered among them, that have come into my world. I mean, hell, like you're in Nashville and you're in Iowa City, Iowa, respectively, Winona and Tim. And you are now like, I'm going to come and see both of you. It's happening. It's happening. Q1 22. Like it's happening.
Yes.
And that's because I have actually doubled down on who I am and what I believe, and my actions are reflective of that. Like it's the same thing. A community can do that. Yes. Right? Am I crazy? Like, does that seem
Not
crazy?
At all.
No.
That's exactly right. Exactly how we think about this stuff. Communities are just collections of people. And I think, Rebecca, one of the most exciting topics that we've hit on in our conversations with you so far is really talking about how do you really activate and empower every single member of a community, and what does that mean for the future of a community, and how crucial is that and often overlooked? Because if they're like, you know, the community can get together and really say, we are this, and we're all so excited to be this thing and be who we are, like that is so magnetic. That's success right there. And people aren't talking about that because it's hard to be like, well, the ROI on personal development is this. Mm-hmm. Like that's just right. Not a thing, but but that doesn't mean it's not truly crucial work. That's why when you guys started talking and I was like, oh my God, you care about people. Like you care about the people side of this whole thing. And it's because, and even from a community level, like you can put a strategic plan in place. That's not what we're talking about. Right. You can strategic plan all day.
Right.
And a lot of places do. And that's that's important. But like, I don't know. I think if you're not also understanding the power of place as a catalyst for personal change and empowerment and just activation, like you really are missing a big piece of this. That's why I do this work. Like I've felt that in my own life. I want everyone to feel like they're in a place where they can be their best selves, and the place supports that and helps them get there. And that's so important. What's more important than that?
Well, what if love was a strategy? I mean, what if that was a thing, right? Like the idea of, so I've often said, like, I have an articulated favorite feeling. Okay. You guys ready? Yeah. It's when I feel verklempt. Okay. So like that feeling of, I'm so overcome by the depth of what I'm feeling. It happens in conversations. It happened. Me and my daughter went down to Omaha. Well, my whole family went, but me and my little girl, she's 7. We went to Hamilton on Broadway in Omaha. I got verklempt 6 times, 6 different times. Like the tears sprang and like I got the big lump in my throat and I looked at her and her big eyes. And I was like, oh my God, like that can be a strategy, or at least something that we're including into the conversation. It just have to be verklempt, right? Mm-hmm. But that feeling of it's connection and it's belonging and you actually feel moved by what you're a part of. To me, like, why the hell wouldn't we want more people to feel like that?
Yeah,
on the regular, you know?
Places can provide that. And what makes it tricky is I feel like right before the pandemic, all we heard about was like company culture and corporate culture. And it's such a hard thing because it means different things to different people, right? Like company culture is not plopping a ping pong table in the break room and hoping people have fun together in there. Like, oh yeah, ping pong's fun. That's cool. But there might be people who that just doesn't mean anything. Maybe they just want to get paid $1 more an hour. And like, that's the culture they want. And so I think asking questions about like, what do people value when they're making a decision about where to live? And then providing them insight on how your community provides that. That's how people are going to be able to make the decision.
Right.
You know, and you were talking about this before about like if somebody moves for a job. My family relocated from New Jersey to Iowa when I was in 8th grade. And so I mean, I lived this firsthand, and we moved for my dad's job. So headquartered in Dubuque, Iowa. It's a town of like 65,000 or so, right on the border of Iowa, Wisconsin, and Illinois, right where those 3 states meet. Beautiful town and very nice people. I think if you asked people in Dubuque what makes it special, they would say that the people are nice, and they are. But for my mom, who was a teacher, she had to re-get it. She had to get her teaching license in the state of Iowa. Her teaching license didn't transfer. And we moved in the middle of the school year. So she spent 1.5 years at home all by herself. Right. Oh. And so because my sister and I were in school, dad was at work. He had his sort of like built-in friends already in the office, you know?
Yeah.
And my mom and the dog hung out all the time. And it was a really long time before it became home for her, you know?
Yep.
And nobody asked her. You know, my dad's company didn't ask her. The community didn't ask her. And so I think about that a lot when people are moving. So you'll hear them called trailing spouse programs in a lot of places. We call them bonus careers. You have a bonus person coming along, you're going to get to hire as well.
Right.
But if you haven't engaged that person in 30 days, 90 days, they're already hopping on Zillow looking for places back home because, you know, they'll never call their new place home ever. Home is back where they came from, you know? And that's why we have these community onboarding programs that we can train people on. And yeah, how do you make people fall in love with a place that either they're choosing for a job, you know, and then they'll only be there maybe as long as the job is great.
Right.
And how do we get people to choose a place before a job or along with the job, you know, especially in a time when every company in the country is hiring, you know,
and you can
go anywhere you want.
You can, and you can you could maybe even keep your current job and still go somewhere, like, because there's so much opportunity, with totally. remote employment. So this is something that I think is so fascinating because the overlap with this work, like the way you guys approach it and my professional experience in organizational development, it is just, there are so many ties. So I a lot of times do consulting with banks just because I was a banker. I was a securities licensed person. Like I know the world. It's only the right banks, by the way. Like I'm very picky about like who I want to work with because you gotta want to get on board with my way of thinking about this stuff or it doesn't work. So I'm definitely not for everybody. But I've said to them, you ask any company what makes you great, especially banks. They're really good at this. Like, what makes your bank different? And they're like, our people make the difference. Yeah. And like you could put it on a billboard. And I'm like, oh yeah, well, that's what they said. And that's what they said. And that's what they said. And that's what they said. So again, if we're going to keep saying like our people are what it is, what about our people? Right. Yeah. Like dig down. Who are we as people, right? And I just think there's so much power in that. And
who's going to live in a place full of assholes, right?
Right. I mean, you kind of want to be like, of course it's your people, because what else are you going to say? But
and guess what? There are assholes in North Dakota.
Oh, yeah. I know a handful. I know a handful of them.
I should say we did not meet a single one.
Yeah, none of the
In our
people
trip.
clearly, yeah, and none of them live in Oaks. I mean, let's be real. Yeah, no assholes in Oaks. But here's what I think is the biggest trick about all of this. And I think about, like, I lay in bed at night. When I wake up, these are the things I think about. That definitely makes me weirdo, and I'm fine. It's fine. Cool.
No, honestly, Rebecca, can I just say,
Yeah.
The community kind of connectors and activators and advocates that we met on this trip, all of them said something along the lines of, I can barely even sleep. I'm so excited about this work. And like, that's so awesome. Never lose that.
Well, I think if I lose it, then the world has lost what I'm here to do and what I'm here to give. Yeah. And I want every person on the planet to like figure out pieces of that and then turn on to that. And then I just think our communities will all light up. That's like when I think about what I want to see. But I lay in bed at night and I think about the fact that, okay, so I have this core set of understandings, expertise, skills when it comes to helping a company work through this exact process of building culture, reinforcing culture, hiring, firing, recruiting, and retaining based on culture. So I'm like, okay, here we go over here to community development. So much overlap. The primary difference for me, and so I would love your take on this, is that a company has a group of people that are tasked. You know, there's an executive leadership team. There's a leadership team that you can look to. And if, like, again, like one of the clients, especially that I'm working with right now, it's like a love fest every time we get together. It is beautiful. I have never felt more aligned with like who I am as a person and the work I get paid to do. Like, it's incredible, right? So you've got this leadership team that's driving that for a company. There's like, you can get your arms around it. And then you move over to the community and it's like, you've got leaders, but are they the ones to you got to engage them, but are they the ones to make this happen? And then it's almost like flipping the script and saying, how do we build it from the ground up? What does a grassroots effort for this kind of work look like? And that's my conundrum, guys. So like, what do you think about that? Cause that's what I lay in bed and I'm like, how do I figure this out? Like, and I know what I got to do too. Some is just try things and not be so damn afraid for it not to work, because hell, we don't know what's going to work, but please help me. Like, what do you, and any of us that are doing this kind of work, because it's different, right? You know, I mean, you got city council and you've got, and they're elected. And again, I'm not speaking about my personal people, but sometimes there's all sorts of motivations for why you pursue those things. And it has nothing to do with making your place better.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of times it doesn't. It can be a very selfish thing, but I mean, I think for us, it's asking questions, but then not just asking the questions. It's about being able to deliver on the things that people want and need. Just like company culture. Like if people are like, well, we really want, I was just listening to another podcast here that is done locally in Iowa City. And it was with the guy who was the CEO of this company that was sort of like known for their company culture. They won like best places to work every year. Right.
Yep.
And so the host of the podcast said, how did you get to that spot? And he said, when we started as a company of 1 and then 5, we just wanted to hire good people, pay them really well, and value what they brought to the table. And they didn't write like goofy shit on the walls about like why people are special or the people make the difference. Like it wasn't that. They valued people. They hired good people who worked hard, and then they had kick-ass holiday parties. And all of a sudden, they were the best place in to work because people were valued and they were celebrated. And when they asked people what they wanted, that was the stuff they wanted, so they delivered it. If they would have said they wanted a ping pong table, they'd have got one probably. But like if they said they wanted a ping pong table, everybody said that they didn't get one, then you don't care about what I have to say. It's the same thing when you're recruiting people, to a community.
Right.
I was working with a guy back when I was doing this work locally here, who I love telling the story, and Winona knows where I'm going with this, but he was coming from Florida. His wife is from Iowa, and he was coming from Florida, and he was in the energy business. And so that's pretty easy to get plugged in Iowa in the energy business. I said, okay, well, who's coming with you? He said, well, my wife will need a job too. And I said, great. Who can I connect her to? What does she do? And he said, well, she's a dolphin trainer. And I was like, well, dude, we don't. The dolphins that we do have here in Iowa are very well trained, so there's not a great spot for you.
She's going to have to bring her poorly trained dolphins along. Sorry. We could find some farmland to have her erect her own aquarium. We got that, but yeah. Oh my goodness, that's hilarious.
It's a silly story, right? But it's like, what if she would have said like, well, I love the beach, and like, which is a very common thing in Florida, right?
Right.
And if we would have been like, oh, well, we have lakes, and like, we're not really answering her question, right? Like maybe we're just not the right fit, and that's okay too. You know, you do such hard work to get a person there, to lose them because you weren't honest. Like, what a whiff, you know? I think that's worse than not getting them in the first place.
I do too.
Yeah. So Winona, do you have any thoughts about this whole kind of shift from that discussion, what it can look like and how tidy and actually tight it can be for a company versus a community?
Goodness. Yeah. I agree with Tim. I think so much of it is really rooted in just being honest with yourself, with the people that you're interacting with. And then I think also just, not taking the good stuff you do have for granted. But always pushing forward to get better, and kind of knowing that organizational change and, community change famously don't happen quickly. Like these are slow moving, these are kind of big boats to turn. And like, I think honestly, pushing for bigger, better, big dreams is the way, because you're going to achieve those incremental changes in the right direction. And just knowing that, and knowing that, Oaks isn't going to attract 2,000 new residents tomorrow. That's not going to happen. And that's also very okay, right?
Because we couldn't support that. I mean, who we are wouldn't support that. So I love that. And I think a friend of mine, we were just talking the other day, we always call the work that we're doing, whether it's like he owns a coffee shop and a little bistro in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And it's the Simon Sinek. This is an infinite game.
Yes.
You got it. Yeah.
Of course we are.
It's an infinite game. And so when you look at it that way, I also think it's so beautiful, like with my farming roots, and like we're very agricultural. Your job is to just keep planting seeds and just doing what you can to improve the fertility of the ground that you're planting them in. I feel like I have two things that I always have to do, right? And I won't know which seeds are going to germinate. I won't know, you don't know that, but it's grounded in belief, right? So
I love that.
Yeah. And I think, okay, so the other thing with companies that I think is something for us to think about in small towns too, again, like everybody needs their own things and wants their own things when it comes to like what makes an employer ideal for me. But research across industry, across sectors, across the country and the world does remind us there's some fundamental things that need to be in place. People will give the best of themselves when they feel seen and appreciated for who they are. Right? And it's like, so when you look at your welding group, you're not just a bunch of welders, you're Tim who welds and you're Winona who welds. Like, right? And that's a shift, and that's hard, and it takes a lot of effort. But I think and that's what you guys are talking about on the talent attraction for a town. Like if I'm not gonna attract somebody here without some personal one-on-one, probably conversations, asking them deep questions about who they are and what they care about. And then that's where the honesty comes in, whether I can meet those things or whether like, oh man, like I would love to say I can give that to you today, but I can't say here's all the ways we're working on it. That's real and that's honest and it's rad.
And some people want to be part of that growth. Some people want to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's a driving motivator.
Okay, you don't have it.
Absolutely.
But I want to help you get there. And that resonates with a lot of people, especially millennials. They love that crap.
Oh, I love that you said that, because I've said this again, like you guys are like, you really are my you're just like, oh, you're such kindred spirits. It's amazing. I've said that, like, generally, we've never seen a generation that gives a shit more about social impact than this group of people. And if we can't see that as something to just attract them and give them some freedom, give them the artistic license to shape it and create it the way they want.
And the
then
invitation and the space and the
all of it.
It seemed I think early on, like when we were hearing all these negative things about millennials, it was like, they're aloof. They're not dialed in. They're not connected. They're late to work. Well, like what are you providing them to really connect? And now it's changing, and it changed out of necessity.
I think one of the like really crystallizing moments for me around this topic was I did a press trip to Milwaukee a few years ago, and we were in a group. The city, there was kind of an organization adjacent to the city that had convened this group of, mentors in the business community and mentees, try to keep them there and really provide a path to success and get them plugged into this community. And we were there as kind of marketers and journalists, just learning about the program. And this trip had been very, very honest, like brutally honest. There was a couple kind of side trips that like some of us had gotten emotional because it was just like, here's the problems that we're facing here, right? It was very intense. And so I was asking one of the young people in this cohort about that and just saying, we've seen a very honest view of your city the past few days. Like how does that how do you view that or whatever? And she just said, I just wish people knew that millennials especially, we're not looking for a perfect place. We're looking for a place that knows it's imperfect and invites us to help make it better. And that's all we want is that invitation. And I think a lot of cities, that's where they think we have to put on this perfect facade, this message of perfection. And that place doesn't exist. And I think it just speaks to the millennial need for authenticity and connection and all those great things that you don't have to do that. You just have to say, here's where we're great, here's where we're not, and we want you to help.
Yeah.
And I think
the best residents want that. You don't have to be a millennial to want to be in a place where
agreed
you can make a difference and connect.
Again, it's contribution, right? It's your special way. And again, it's so funny because the way I talk, sometimes people will be like, oh, everybody's special. And I'm making everybody I'm like, but they are. Damn it.
100%.
And I'm not saying that means that we don't have, that we can't hold people to real expectations of behavior, like in a company, especially, right? Where that seems performance matters. That conversation happens more in company culture than in community culture. But we're not just saying anything goes and be your special snowflake self and it's fine and we're going to love that. It's acknowledging that all three of us, this is a great example. The three of us, we share a lot of similarities, but we still are nuanced because we're freaking people. So how I'm going to show up and where I want to give of myself, plus we evolve over time. Holy, why are we not talking about that, right? Who I am in my 20s, and then when I get married and have children, and then what my early childhood or early child rearing age looks like, what I can give, what I want to give, where I give it, how I give it, looks totally different than it will 10 years from now. And our communities need to see we're evolving all the time and people are evolving all the time. Mm-hmm. And so it's constant, it's re-invitation. You said, it's actively choosing every single day to be here and actively inviting every single day. Infinite game. It's not, I mean, it's just, and I love it.
It's all about being proactive, and it's all about, I think so many economic developers and community leaders, I think they do know this stuff, and they do act on it in a lot of ways in their personal lives, I think, and they very much believe in it, but it's just sort of breaking down that barrier in their belief system about what economic development is and looks like and can be. And just saying these things that you already know to be true can really be applied to this space and should be applied and are effective, even if we do have to kind of tweak the way we're looking at, metrics and ROI and stuff, but it's worth examining and it's absolutely worth doing.
So I could talk to you guys all day. I mean, it's Friday. Friday.
We do a 7-hour podcast.
Well, it's so funny. It's I want to just it's 10 in the morning and I want to crack open a bottle of wine and keep talking to you guys. Right. So, but we'll do that in person. It'll be amazing. It's been wonderful to, I just get so excited thinking about all the people that are going to hear this. And this is my effort to keep, it's beating the drum and just saying, like, waving my flag, right? It's like, these things matter. And it's really fun to have had you on. Before we go though, what in your mind, what's like one simple thing the average resident, okay, so because this podcast isn't only for leaders, or like, that's bullshit to me. Like, everybody's a leader in their own right, in their own way. And in fact, I think if we can make room for that, like, all the better, right?
Yeah.
So just the average person living in their small community in particular, what can they do right now to positively shift the face, the culture, the vibe?
Oh, this is a great question.
Their small town.
I have an answer right off the bat.
Tim.
I have an answer for me.
Yeah, no, perfect. I want it from each of your individual. Yeah. This isn't a roll call. You guys didn't put your heads together and say, what is the roll call official position on this? Yeah. No.
But I think it is sort of tied on into, like, so we get asked a lot, like, do you do your work for companies too? Like, could we work with like a huge financial organization or whatever and do this like, yeah, I mean, it would translate, but we don't. We want to work with places, economic developers, chambers of commerce. And for me, I think my advice to anyone who's listening to this, people who are listening to this are probably pretty engaged in their communities, pretty involved. But if they're not, and if they're giving advice to someone who's not, my advice would be to walk into the doors of your chamber of commerce. Because the average citizen, if you walk down the street and you asked 100 people, how many of them would know what a chamber of commerce does? Right? It's like, but they're the chamber professionals and economic development organization professionals. They're the most engaged, and they're connectors, and they're like this hub of like people who give a shit, right? So if you give a shit and you want to be around people who can help you, like, plug in, maybe it's arts and culture, maybe it's events, maybe it's business attraction, maybe it's recruiting or whatever it is, they're going to be the ones who know how to get you connected. And we love amplifying the message of economic developers and chambers because they're so important to the health and success of communities, and they don't get credit, B, they're understaffed and overworked. Always. And people just don't value what they do. And I have a chamber, I worked in a chamber, full disclosure, so I'm coming at this from a little bit of a biased lens, but my very first entry into Iowa City, which is a very, very special community, was when I walked in the doors of the Chamber of Commerce. And that's how I got connected. And I was in sales. I was in sales and marketing, selling digital marketing. And I liked it, but I was missing the community piece. And I got it at the chamber. And that's how all of this started.
That's amazing.
7 or 8 years ago.
So I love that. So I'm gonna hear Winona's, and then I'm gonna give you a follow-up to think about, Tim. What about a town that actually doesn't officially have those things? Okay,
yeah, so there's somebody there. There's someone there.
So figure out who.
Open the door. Yep.
Yeah. Find the person who is acting as the cheerleader or promoter of your community.
Yep.
Love it.
Find the person who cannot sleep because they're so excited about community development.
Exactly. Because they're there. Yep. They might not have feel safe enough or confident enough to fly the freak flag like you do.
Right.
But they're there. They're all over the place.
It's like hashtag find the weirdo.
Yeah. And that's one of the best things about our work is we're finding them.
Yeah, I know.
We get to scream about them.
Fellow weirdos. I love it. Okay. That's
forever.
That's fantastic, Tim. Oh, and by the way, I would be remiss if I didn't give an enormous shout out to my partner in crime at the Chamber of Commerce in Oaks, North Dakota. Her name is Kasha McGill. And she and I, it's just like a beautiful synergy. It's been so seriously much fun. Like, it's ridiculous.
We'll meet her when we come back.
You will. Yeah, you should, because she's fantastic. Okay. Winona.
Oh, I love this question, Tim. I love your answer. I've been like thinking back on the conversation we've had so far. And I think the big takeaway for me is that love is a strategy and home is a verb, right? Like,
love.
what can we do to amplify and grow both of those ideas? And so I think mine's like a little less tangible than Tim's, but I would just really say to everyone, what are the moments and the places and the groups of people that make you feel that experience of home in an active way, those moments where you say, this is my home. And whether it's, a weekly, like a book club thing, a volunteer thing, an event, a community event, whatever it is where you get that feeling.
Is it a waiter or waitress who knows your name?
Yes. What is it? Yep. Anything. There's so many options. I think I'm sure like thousands of different things could possibly come to mind as an answer to that question. But then I would say, and then invite someone into that experience with you. Just invite someone new into that. And just so we can start magnifying and amplifying that.
Love, love, love it. So I want to share my idea for people. I asked you the question. You're technically the experts on this call for sure, or on this podcast episode for sure. But next Wednesday here in Oaks, me and Kasha, my right-hand friend here, we are hosting what we're calling a Dream Out Loud session. And I looked at her and I said, I think this is about, like, how do you find those people, right? How do you find the people that would be fun to just brainstorm like big, crazy ideas with? And so we had two questions that were the criteria for who we were going to invite into this conversation. So it is an invitation, and technically it's not public. And so it's not that it's exclusive, but we're just going to start with this and see what happens. So, I said to her, between you and I, so it'll be you and I, and then let's come up with 3 other people that we agree meet these 2 criteria. So the first was, who do we love to bounce ideas off of? Like, who do we, just like, we're so excited to share our ideas with this person. And then the second is, who actually energizes us, right? Yes. So 2 simple questions, like, we'll see how this goes. Like, I'm telling everybody in real time, like, this is the experiment. So we came up with 3 people. And then I said, okay, so now the thing is, every single one of us, there's 5 of us. I said, we have to invite 2 to 3 more people that fit that for them as well. So it's getting outside of our own sphere, right? And oh my God, it was so much fun to like send the message and say, hey, it's going to be, kind of a guided, facilitated discussion, but I'm not prepping you with anything. I just want you to bring who you are. Like, you meet you meet this set of criteria for me, and we can't wait to dream about the future of Oaks together. There's men, there's women, there's young, there's, older, like people that have lived a little longer. And so already it's like a really interesting eclectic mix of people. So I will keep you posted on like,
please do,
what that becomes. And I've thought to myself, like, what if this becomes like a little quasi group and we meet periodically? And I have no idea what'll come of it, but I do know that amazing things happen when you get the hell out of the way sometimes, and you just inviting people and saying like, we value you. We value the energy you bring, and we value your ability to brainstorm cool ideas.
And we're going to create a safe place for you to be able to do it.
Psychological safety is where it's at, man. In a town like Oaks, if you don't have a place where that stuff can happen and people can feel free to speak, that's a good place to start too. Can you create that somewhere in your space if it doesn't already exist?
Disagree.
I love that. I'm starting that in Nashville today. I think that's a great idea.
It'll be really interesting to see what comes out. Like, I think the question we're going to lead with is just, what do you think this town needs? What do you think this town would benefit from having, doing, or being? And just see where the hell it leads us. Like, I can't wait. It's going to be super fun. So
awesome.
I think, the kind of, I don't have a tagline for the show, but the main idea is just for everybody that ever listens to any of these episodes is just do what you can with what you have where you are. Like, start something. If you have an idea, what can you, take some small step, right? Like, that's activation. It's doing something, right? So I hope that that's what people take away from this. You guys are amazing.
So are you.
It's all you, Rebecca. You're
This is really fun. I can't believe we went over an hour.
Well, of course we did, because I don't watch my clock. And I was like, I'll keep us at an hour. Right. Just
I
call me
canceled
like,
all of our meetings for today, just in case.
oh, well, good. So then we can just lead into wine o'clock or beer o'clock or whatever.
I'm in.
You guys are amazing. You will be coming back because this is an infinite game of a love fest between us. It's just getting started. Thank you guys
Definitely.
so
Thanks,
much.
This was awesome.
It was great. Thank you.